A very big good morning, afternoon, even to you. My name's Jim Kent, here with the Paper Jam Delano Business Club. Good morning to, well, Matthew Trickoy, Brian Bovey. Big good afternoon to you, gentlemen, as well. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, this topic is something that really does apply to all of us, doesn't it? Where all of us can improve our assertive communication techniques. And in fact, our guest today knows the Paper Jam Club extremely well. In fact, probably better than I do, as he was the Paper Jam Club director until 2018. So he would have been my boss if I had arrived 2 years earlier. And indeed, we're always happy to welcome him back. Nowadays, our guest is a communications consultant and a corporate trainer. His speciality is to help others master the art of public speaking, upgrade their presentation skills, and improve their interpersonal communication skills. And let's face it, who doesn't need to do that? Today, he will be speaking to us about assertive communication in this webinar entitled Speak Up, where he will help us discover how to assert ourselves while remaining true to our nature and communication style. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome on stage with me, Mr. Guy Benzino. Guy, if you'd like to join me. Guy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm happy that my timing with the camera was just right.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I'm sure we would have had a lot of fun working together had you come a little sooner or I'd stayed a little longer. But nice seeing you in the club premises. So without further ado, I guess I'll take it away. So thank you for all the participants for joining us. The topic of today is about balance. That's going to be really one of the themes you're going to see throughout. Assertiveness is going to be all about striking the right balance between other styles of communication. And so really, if you don't have that balance right, maybe sometimes, and we all sometimes don't have that balance right, it's a struggle, but we can be either too pushy or dominant or domineering, or what's known technically as aggressive in this kind of model. And or you could just sometimes be too nice, say yes to things you don't really want to say, and not being able to express your ideas, and kind of be more passive. So that's why assertiveness is a balancing act. And so it's a good topic for us to delve in, because it's pretty intuitive. Most of the things that you will hear about, you'll probably recognize, you'll probably remember, make you think, it'll resonate with you with other experiences that you've had. And that's no surprise. But the idea here is to give you a map of the territory, to give you a model how through which you can think through these kinds of dynamics and hopefully have better outcomes. So we'll define the terms, and we will explore the different languages, and we'll see also how we communicate assertively, not just with our words, but also with our body language and our voice. So that's what I have for you. I thought we might start things out with this live storm. We have the possibility of having surveys, and I thought it'd be interesting to just take a moment to see what the audience and what the audience's own self-assessment is as it regards to these styles. So we have, I think, 3 questions, one question, and we're asking you to select from that. Let me have a look at the poll
So the
now.
way this works is on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see 4 tabs: the chat, questions, polls, and people. So for this particular webinar, we encourage you to be as engaged as you possibly can. Feel free to ask Guy whatever questions you like, and you can do that in the question tab. We're asking you a question. But right now, we'd like you to direct you to the polls tab. So Guy, I think we've got 3 statements for our guests. What are they?
So which one of these statements do you agree with most? So occasionally, I tend to be too pushy, and I would like to learn to be more assertive without alienating others, because that is the problem when you're pushy, is that you have difficulty maybe federating people around your idea. The other statement is, occasionally I tend to be too nice, right? And I would like to learn to stand up for what I really want and to be assertive without alienating others. I find third statement, I find that most of the time I read a given situation quite well and adapt my behavior appropriately to get outcomes that are fair and leave my relationship with others unharmed. So have a look at which statement you feel corresponds to you. Maybe other statements make you think of other people. And we'll just see generally what is our audience composed of: more people who are too nice or people who are too pushy, and how, and feel free to comment if you know how that manifests itself. We might be able to springboard on some of the comments you make.
Of course, Guy, I'm just thinking, maybe I think I'm too nice, but maybe my colleagues think I'm too pushy. Just a thought. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to select your answer, well, we've got a clear winner, with the majority of our guests on this call saying, occasionally I tend to be too nice and would like to learn to stand up for what I really want, to be assertive without alienating others. Ooh, Guy, are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised by that, because people who are maybe, let's say, too aggressive tend to be less self-aware. That's probably why they're aggressive. They don't do it on purpose. They're not even aware that they are. And generally, of all there's 4 combinations of balance that you can have. And most often people tend to put themselves down and see others as better until you get through this adulthood, or you get fully through this, maturity level. But generally, in growing up, it's very common. That's the most common outcome. We want to please others, and we start with the family circle while pleasing our parents, and so on and so forth. So, okay, so thank you. We just took the pulse of the webinar participants. I will then move on with just a bit about the origin of assertiveness, and these origin of how it is that we communicate in these 3 different styles. I would just like to share with you a different screen to just draw a little bit my thoughts here. Okay, so this is a whiteboard. So there is actually an evolutionary reason why we have these different ways of communicating. And so you can imagine that we've evolved as animals, and our species is a tribal species. So we have evolved with family and clan and a tribe. And essentially, as animals, you can imagine that we started out just a bunch of individuals all on the same level, okay? And we're just trying to survive in the wilderness. And none of us are necessarily better than the other, but very quickly, it becomes apparent that somebody or a few people may have an advantage, a competence or a skill that we don't have, or they're physically stronger. So there is a distinction. There's a natural hierarchy that happens because people don't have the same, luck of the draw, or don't work with the same skills or aptitudes. And this can go on until we reach a kind of pyramid situation, which we find in all sorts of species and all of societies. And so when we are all competing for resources, right, we might want to, one person might want to discuss with somebody else, they might want to talk up to them. And when you're speaking to somebody that's a different level, you want to make sure you're not perceived as a threat. Equally, when you have a certain privilege or a certain position, you want to make it very clear to the other, and you might talk down to them. And so this is also all throughout the animal kingdom that we see these ways of posturing. It's not just language, it's even body language. It's like eye contact and so on and so forth. So we have all these subliminal ways of making people know what is the pecking order, okay? And if that's not respected, it can lead to even violence. And then of course, the other language is people talk among equals, okay, in black here. So with that in mind, we then see that the more dominant red approach is the aggressive one. The blue one we'll say is more submissive, but we'll use the word passive. And kind of the equal is about being assertive. Like we mentioned, equal status. So I like to begin with a bit of that origin story to kind of give you the biological background here, because it's not just a model that works well and has good outcomes. There is a scientific reasoning behind that, and it is very, very much innate in us as animals, okay? So that's the hierarchy. And you can see here the different colors, and we talk about submissive or passive, we talk about dominant, aggressive, and neutral, which is assertive, okay? So we've evolved as animals to recognize these things innately. You know, we also get to learn it. We also get to learn it through culture and our family, but it is universal, okay? So now let's take it one step further and let's see what it is to be assertive. And I do like to start with terms, defining terms, and I have a dictionary definition for you that I hope will be helpful, and you'll see it'll reflect the main theme here. Assertiveness, okay, the adjective, is the ability to honestly and clearly, okay, honestly and clearly, you're understood and you're honest, you're saying the truth, truthful. You're honestly and clearly expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs, okay? And you're doing that with two other items. You're doing that with integrity and respect. So, pardon me. Integrity means that you honor yourself. You are truthful to your needs, and you're honoring you're not putting yourself in a back seat. You're honoring yourself, and respect means you're honoring others. And that's why we have this equal sign between these two, this little logo that I made for assertiveness. Okay, so like we said, it's a balancing act, and I'd like to just share a few concepts that we can kind of like put around these ideas. So the first one we said, equal footing. I'm okay, you're okay. That's kind of one of the first self-help books from the 60s, from Thomas Harris, which explains that, you know, if you accept that you're a good person, there's no bad actors here. You're an okay person. You just might be under stress. You might have particular needs. The other person is an okay person. They're not evil. They're not bad. They just have a lot of stress, or they're under competing interests. And so the idea is that nobody here is less valuable or less worthy, or their needs and desires are less worthy than the others. The other idea that is going to be useful here is to understand that how you feel about certain things is going to have to do a lot with your inner scripts, what it is that you tell yourself about others. And particularly, instead of saying, oh, that person is awful, oh, that person is so annoying, even outside of the meeting, after they've said what they've said to you, if you project on them, it'll have an effect on this equal footing that is maybe disrupted, where you might dislike or you might be rejecting the other person. Okay, and in assertiveness, it's also about understanding that you have rights and obligations, okay, and other people have rights and obligations. And essentially, you have to apply the golden rule. In other words, treat others the way you would want to be treated yourself, okay? And in assertiveness, we'll see that we only control our own behavior, right? We can't control others. And then we will try to be deliberate in how our behavior manifests, what behavior we choose to adopt in a given situation. So here we have it. Honoring yourself and respecting others is a balance, and that allows you to communicate assertively. And it is not something that you are, it's something that you try to do, okay? It's not I am or I am not assertive. I become or I try to be assertive in a given situation to have better outcomes. And there can be an imbalance where somebody, for example, if you're nervous at the idea of failure, you're under enormous pressure, you have a sales target, you might actually put a high priority on something that you need absolutely and pay less attention to the other competing interests, okay, and to other people's needs. And you might kind of like be tempted to bulldoze because you feel there's such an important emergency. And you might not see it, you might be blindsided, but you're actually maybe being aggressive, okay? So if you put your needs as a priority, especially if you do it in a recurring fashion, you may be at being aggressive. And on the contrary, if you're passive, other people's needs matter more than you. So for example, if your boss asks you for something and you're happy to work late on certain important projects or emergency, but on that given night, you actually had important family plans, you might tend to just say yes because you can't bear the idea of being assertive and say, I'm really sorry, but I really can't tonight stay late or do this thing. You take kind of the easy way out and you avoid confrontation, or you feel it might be confrontation, but then you might resent yourself for doing so, or you might resent the others, your boss, for asking or for putting you in that situation and canceling your family plans. So that's not a solution. In fact, your boss might ask you, let's say for a report that absolutely needs to be done by Friday, and you need to collate all sorts of data and put it together. And the deadline is very short, and you might just say yes because you're passive, even though you have some serious concerns about how realistic it is to be able to make that deadline. So you don't say anything, the deadline comes in, and what do you know? The report's not ready. Not only is your boss not happy, but your other colleagues also who need this report are not happy with you. And then you tell them, well, I couldn't do it, there wasn't enough time, but they actually aren't happy because you didn't ask for help, okay? They would have helped you if you had said something. Okay, so a lot of this has to do with this scripting in our mind, especially if something comes up and we don't have time to think about it. It's reflexive, right? And so it's about verifying what are the scripts and the things that you tell yourself that drives your behavior. Okay. Also, if you are, you might resent people because you're always in the same pattern. And again, by resenting them, you might actually become aggressive. So not just passive, but then switch back to being aggressive yourself. So it's really about finding a way to be neutral, knowing that you're not perfect, but that you have rights and you also have obligations, but and so respecting that and being true to yourself and speaking up for what it is that you want. Okay, so here's a little chart with these two columns, your needs and other people's needs. Okay, when other people's needs are more important and you do this on and on, you have a tendency to be passive. And when you give your needs too much importance, you're aggressive, and so on. Now, there is another vector we can bring in, not only do we have consideration for you versus others, okay, but we also have people who have less openness to communicate. They're less happy to speak up about these issues. And so we have a four-way quadrant, and we introduce this new idea, which is the passive aggressive, which is in the bottom left. So if you're in low consideration for others, you may be aggressive or passive aggressive, right? And if you are low openness to communication, you may be passive or passive aggressive also. But when you're both low consideration for that and low openness, you end up resenting people, but you don't do it openly. You do it behind their back. And there comes like a sabotage, different degrees of sabotage, and it can even happen in the office. Let me tell you a story if you think to illustrate passive aggressive behavior and how it's the worst of the four because it is lose-lose. There is a woman who has a brand new car and she goes to the supermarket, and next to her parks a very nice Bentley with a woman who seems to be well-to-do, and she has a very expensive car. Now, the Bentley parks, the woman with the Bentley goes away, and the woman comes to pick up her brand new car that she really loves and she really cares about because it's the first time she buys a new car. And she noticed that the Bentley dented her car, okay? So normally an assertive person would go politely and catch up with the woman and say, excuse me, I think you bumped my car, you scratched my car. An aggressive person would go and shout at her and maybe attack her. But a passive aggressive person would go ahead and key her car and get back in the car and drive away, kind of get revenge, but not in an open way, okay? So that is a good example of lose-lose behavior. And if you think that my example is a little bit extreme, have a look at this video. So this is literally something that happened, and now because Teslas have these surveillance camera with motion detected, this one was caught keying this car. And the owner of the car says he has no interaction with her. This happened in a tennis club, and clearly this woman had a lot of bottled up anger, and maybe something very remote. Somehow she linked the car next to her to something that didn't please her, and she took it out on this poor owner's Tesla owner's car. So these things do happen, and they happen in parking lots, but they also happen in the office, right? So we can imagine passive aggressive behavior that's good for nobody in the office, such as somebody who might maybe resent someone else because they didn't express their needs and feelings. And so when the phone rings, they might not pick up. When they receive that email, they might not reply to it right away. They might put the request of somebody like at the bottom of the pile, okay? They might withhold valuable information from them. So we know that there can be all this like office like tension, and that is not good, right? That is not good for anybody. So why be assertive? There are two reasons I can think of that are quite fundamental. The first one is life is short. Okay, life is too short to not speak up and say what it is that you want. So to illustrate this, we have this book from Bronnie Ware. She's the author of a memoir, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. So Bronnie Ware was actually a nurse in palliative care, so an old people's healthcare. And she worked there for many years, and she took the habit of starting to a diary, and she would write down what these people who were, at the end of their life, sometimes only months or weeks to live, what they would tell her. And she grew this diary over time, and she made it into a book where she basically kind of saw a pattern between the most common regrets people had in life. And one of the big lessons from her book is that the number one regret among the dying was failure to find the courage to live a life true to oneself. People would live what people expected them to rather than what they actually wanted. So, you can't really get what you want if you don't have a plan and if you don't know how to say it, right? The most powerful idea, the most powerful thing in the world lives inside of us, and that thing is an idea, okay? But if you don't communicate your ideas to others, there's no way that idea can flourish. That idea becomes powerless. So, expressing yourself and speaking up for your feelings, attitudes, and needs is a core. Well, it's a core need, and it's makes life much more unregretful. The other important reason to be assertive is because you don't live in a vacuum, right? You don't live alone. Even if you have a great idea, you need other people to bring it to life, to realize it. You thrive. You don't thrive alone. You thrive with other people, right? So whenever you're having an exchange with people, you might be negotiating for something or trying to, do something. You want to get what you want. That's one goal. But there's another goal, which is you want to preserve the relationship. And that's what aggressive styles don't accomplish. They get what the person wants very often because they just escalate to the level of aggression that people just comply, but then they resent you. Okay, so you're not preserving the relationship, and you're not able to therefore have collaboration, have teamwork, have influence, have safety in numbers, have allies, and so on and so forth. And I put here Dale Carnegie because he's kind of the guru of self-help in terms of influence, and How to Make Friends an Influenced Person is a seminal book. And he certainly says that being agreeable and being likable has its advantage. The power of getting others to be willing to collaborate with you is what you want to do. So those are why assertiveness has that advantage, okay? So assertiveness is simple, okay? But it's not easy, it's hard. And it's hard in the sense that it's HARD, okay? And if we look at these four qualities, non-assertive, passive people are not honest because they don't really tell you fully what they think, right? But they always are appropriate for A, and they're respectful for R, but they're not direct. But if we look at honest, appropriate, respectful, and direct, we see that aggressive people, they're very honest and they're very direct, but sometimes they're rather inappropriate and not always respectful. Assertive people check all the boxes, okay? You're honest, appropriate, respectful, and direct. And of course, lose, they're not honest, they're not appropriate, they're not respectful, and they're not direct. It's passive aggressive strategies. Okay, so let's see how that could apply to your words, to your voice, and to your body language. Because in public speaking, we know that it's not just your words, it's how you say the words, right? And so in assertiveness, we can also kind of have a look at that. So one way that you weaken your speech, for example, is if you have disfluencies, you have filler words, you have a lot of hesitations. You punctuate your sentences with the words that don't really add value. We all do this to some extent. The idea is to not do it so much that it's distracting, or in the case of assertiveness, so much that it gives the impression that you don't really know what you think or what you want. So being assertive in terms of your verbal language also has to do with delivering what you have to say with conviction and with no disfluencies or few disfluencies. Another way that we weaken our speech, in other words, not being assertive, is when we speak more than necessary, right? If you want to be direct and honest, you say what you want, you say why you want it, you say why you deserve it, right? And that's it. You don't say more than necessary. You don't over-explain. You don't provide too much detail or justify yourself unnecessarily. So in a sense, you deliver your message, and when you finish delivering it, you stop, okay? It's like a gymnast that does all her tricks and turns and flips, and then she just sticks her landing, okay? Same thing with you. That is impressive when somebody says their piece and then, keeps quiet, is comfortable with silence, is comfortable with a dramatic pause, okay? Letting the power of their words weigh on, the people they've just addressed. Another important part of having a strong speech and not weakening it is having clarity, okay? Clarity of message, being clear with what you have to say. And in that regard, it's very important to take some time and think through what it is that you want to say. If you can't just want to be assertive, you need to know what you want. You need to be clear on what it is that your request, what is your attitude. You might be frustrated with a project, you might be frustrated with the way things going at work, but you have to stop and really analyze and think to yourself, what is annoying me? Is it that I have to do this report, or is it the fact that I always do the same thing every week? Like, I don't mind doing it once in a while, but I'd like more variety, or I'd like to be asked my opinion before these important decisions take place, or I would like to have more resources. But as you're going through these feelings of being passive, you need to take into account what it is that you want before you know what to say. Okay. There's a great quote by Nicolas Boileau: ce que l'on conçoit bien s'énonce clairement, et les mots pour le dire arrivent aisément. So people want to have great delivery, want to be super assertive, but it really has to do with being very clear in your own mind about what your attitudes are, what your message is, and delivering it with strength. So I see that I have a little, not much time left, so I'm just going to skip a little bit here forward. And I'm going to give you two of the techniques. One idea about assertive behavior is also about taking responsibility. So for example, let's take a real life example. You have a boss that has an assessment of an employee, and he has to announce that there's no bonus that year because that person didn't perform up to the task, up to the expected level. So the person could be passive, that boss could be passive and just say, I'm sorry, it wasn't my decision. There wasn't a lot of budget this year for bonuses, so we had to make tough choices. That's not assertive. That person doesn't even have the chance to understand what happened. Having the difficult conversation of saying, I'm sorry, but you did this and this year. Other people did much better. And let me give you examples. And in this circumstances, this is the decision I made. Okay. People that are assertive use I statements. Okay. They say how they feel. They take responsibility for their words. Okay. Equally, when you have to negotiate fees with a client, there is extra fees, new fees. You might be very uncomfortable. If your client, the person in front of you, feels that you're uncomfortable, they're going to be uncomfortable, or they're going to feel that they can take advantage of it. So I'm okay, you're okay. You take responsibility for the fact that, yes, I gave you an estimate, but here are the intervening reasons why I have to charge you more. Okay. And yes, there's a reason why there's more fees. For example, maybe you changed your mind several times. Maybe this is not the same scope of work, and so on. Now I'm going to give you 3 techniques to deal with aggressive behavior. On the one hand, you should practice detachment. If you see people being aggressive, it doesn't reflect on you. It's their problem. Okay. The second is resist non-assertive responses. So that means don't be aggressive yourself when somebody's aggressive, and don't also cave in. So what you can do is do something called fogging. You kind of give a non-answer. Okay. So for example, you might say something like, okay, if you say so. Or you might say something, you're entitled to your own opinion, right? Fine, you're entitled to your own opinion. I'm not saying you're right, but I'm not saying you're wrong either. And then it's perfectly okay to take a timeout and to say, look, I don't think this is a good time for us to have this conversation, or I can't have this conversation with you right now. You're shouting at me, you're animated, and it makes me uncomfortable. We'll talk later. But then if you do want to have that conversation, you want to confront an aggressive person, the idea is, how can we bring them down from their aggressive stance instead of talking down at us, and break them down to speak to our level? So you could use this 4-step process. I understand, then you say I feel, then you say I want, and then you ask him if that's okay. So for example, you can say, I understand that it's quicker and more convenient for you to make the decision alone, first step. But I feel excluded and quite demotivated when I'm not consulted on these matters that directly affect my projects. That's the second step. I feel demotivated. Third, you give them an ask. Next time, I would really rather you ask me for my thoughts before you take decisions on things like this. Would that be okay? 4-step process. And if that's not okay, then you ask them why. You listen to what they say, and you try it again. I understand, I feel, I want, and you reformulate it. Now, if you are managing people and they are being passive, it might be interesting to get them, to draw them in, okay? So of course you wanna have a psychologically safe environment where they feel that they can take a chance and speak up. So that's generally, the idea. But pay attention to these people, because people who are passive are often hyper alert and observant, and they might have some interesting insights. So somebody who's kind of has maybe something they could contribute but doesn't, you could come up to them and say, I noticed, step one, I noticed you didn't say anything yet in this meeting. I get a sense you're not happy about this project plan. Am I right? And then they might say, well, yes, and you can ask them why, and you can kind of draw them into giving, their critique of what is being discussed. Jim, I think we're almost out of time, so I'm going to give you 2 more thoughts. Yeah, how are we doing?
Doing well. Really, really interesting, Guy. Do continue. It's great stuff.
So we got another 15 minutes. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah, that is correct. Another 11 minutes, really. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I saw a different timer from when we connected, but okay. So we get another 15 minutes. Okay. So let me take you then to what we do with our voices. And particular non-verbal communication. So that what we just saw is how you can use your words to be assertive. Let's look at these 2 other languages, which is what we do with, not with our words, but with the voice and with our body language. So the first thing I'd like to introduce you to is this idea that is a myth that maybe you've heard before. It's not what you say, but it's how you say it. But if you've heard it, thrown around in a statistics format, somebody may have said to you, 93% of all communication is nonverbal, which is a very impressive statistic. And it's based on a study from this gentleman in the 70s, Albert Mehrabian. And his Wikipedia says that he is the most misquoted and misinterpreted man throughout human communication seminars worldwide. So let me tell you why it's misinterpreted, and let me try to give you why it's important to make distinctions here. So the idea of the Mehrabian rule, named after Albert Mehrabian, is that 7% of what you say convinces people through the words, 38% are convinced through through your voice, and 55% through the body language. Okay, so if you do 38 plus 55, nonverbal represent 23%. Now that is true to some extent, but it's only true when 2 other factors are at play. It only applies when your messages are contradictory, when what you say doesn't correspond to the way you're saying it. Okay, so if you're in sync and you're coherent, then that's not a problem. And it only works when you're talking about attitudes and feelings. So when we are looking at assertive communication, very much applies to nonverbal. The nonverbal is very much, because we're always talking about attitudes and feelings, and we want to be in sync so that people believe us when we stand up for ourselves. They actually believe that we're serious, right? That this is important to us. We don't just say this is really important to me and we look down or we look away. Or so. Prosody is one thing that we do with our voice. Okay, so here's a sentence. Let me show you what prosody means. Prosody means that the way you say something can change the meaning of a sentence. So here's an 8-word sentence. I know you love your blue new tie. So if I emphasize the word I, for example, I know you love your blue new tie. Okay, that might mean that I know, but she doesn't know. Okay, you should tell her. If I emphasize the word no, I know you love your blue new tie. It means you've told me 100 times. If I say you, I emphasize, I know you love your blue new tie. It's just that everybody else hates it. And then if I say, I know you love your blue new tie, maybe I'm suggesting you have an unhealthy relationship with that tie. So we can go on. And on the basis of that, we need to be aware that our delivery can also be aggressive or passive or assertive. Here's a sentence. Does this make sense? Okay. If we kind of go up on the word sense, like if we have a higher pitch at the end of the sentence, it kind of expresses doubt. So imagine, does this make sense? Or does this make sense? The first one, does this make sense? Maybe I'm hesitant. Maybe I can even say it more slowly. Does this make sense? It's really expressing that I have doubts and I'd like you to reassure me. If I say, does this make sense? It means, I know it makes sense. I'm just checking if it's okay for you, if you got it, right? So the sentence, the way you say things is going to be part of the messaging. And a lot of that is going to have to do also with your self-script, because rather than be a really good actor, if you have your house in order in your mind about what you believe, I'm okay, you're okay. I have rights and obligations, but so does he, and we're going to find a solution. I'm neutral, and I'm not angry, and I'm not passive aggressive. If in your mind all that happens, your delivery is going to come naturally as well. So here's another final example for the vocal. That incident today really surprised me. So I'm going to say it in two different ways. That incident today really surprised me. I am concerned. I actually think that you don't normally act this way, and I expect that you won't in the future, right? It sounds like I thought things were going well, and I was surprised what happened. This is unlike you. Another way to say it is, that incident today really surprised me. In other words, I'm not happy. I'm kind of annoyed, and my patience is, I don't have patience anymore. So it might sound like you might be about to get fired, okay? So the tone of voice also is what we do with our voice. And then, of course, we have body language, okay? And going back to animal instincts, this is innate, right? So how much eye contact you make with others when you say, I want this is important to me, okay? If we are going to succeed together, I need whatever. I am making eye contact. I am not making myself small, okay? I am not leaning back or sideways, okay? I am perpendicular to the person I'm speaking to. I might even lean forward at one point in the meeting to really press my point, or lean into the camera, right? Not the same as leaning back. Even when you walk into a room, all meetings are theater, even where you sit in the room. So if you take a chair that is turned to the door, you don't see people when they come in. That is not a position of power. When you walk in and you turn your back to the wall and you see people coming in, they're facing you when they're coming in, or if you're closer to the presenter, or if you're closer to where the conversation or the decision makers are going to be speaking, that's all a way of saying, I am here and I am present and I'm not making myself small. I'm not being discreet about it. So I like to also talk about things that are similar to stage fright. People, it's very, very common, like 80% of people all say they have, when they speak in front of large audiences, they get nervous, and it's called glossophobia. But I like to borrow a lot of the ideas that we look at stage fright for assertiveness, right? And the neuroscience of survival is part of what makes it universal. We are wired to have this kind of stage fright. And the reason we are wired to have stage fright is we evolved as animals living in difficult environments where group acceptance was a life or death situation. In other words, you needed to survive to be part of a group. And if you got rejected from a group, that was a death sentence, okay? So we've evolved these instincts where when we speak to one person, maybe if we say something stupid or say something untowards, we can always mend that relationship, that one. But when we start to talk to 5 people or 10 or the entire group, all of a sudden our internal instincts start to perk up and we're really thinking, holy cow, I better not say anything stupid. So that's where it comes from. And in terms of assertiveness, it's similar. When you are with one person or in front of a meeting with a lot of people, it's more difficult to kind of speak up and maybe say the difficult things to say, okay? So the same things are at play here because we all want to be accepted, loved and accepted. And that's where I like to mention this book by Mark Manson called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it's really all about the power of an irreverent mindset and how that can unleash a lot of creative freedom for you and unblock a lot of mental blocks that you have about doing the things that you want and maybe unleashing your potential. And this is a cartoon that's in the book. It's everyone wants to be loved and accepted except for Tim. Tim just doesn't give a fuck. So what does that mean? That means that there is a power about not caring what other people think. And of course, it's a balance. It's important to keep other people on board, be respectful, all these things, but it shouldn't be hindering you. And that's also something we do in stage fright, but it's also something that's relevant here for assertiveness. When you're speaking to an audience or to a group in a meeting, it's important to have this equal footing, like we said, right? So if you're uncomfortable, they're going to be uncomfortable. So even if you have difficult things to say, it's important to say them, but without showing discomfort in being nervous in your body language. And of course, there are factors that make stage fright or the resistance to be assertive more or less difficult. So for example, how many people are present that you have to be asserting yourself against a group of 3, of 7, the relationship, the power dynamic. And it's certainly true that, power dynamic, you can be assertive up to a certain point with your 8-year-old best friend, as opposed to, the shareholder of the company you work for. So these things are at work also, but the mastery of what you have to say also counts. If you're very clear on what you have to say, you can deliver with better delivery. So what I say to people about stage fright, overcoming their stage fright or their nerves, is the same thing I would say about people who have difficulty being assertive. And I would say, take the wisdom of Lao Tzu. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Incremental steps. You don't have to just right away become assertive from one day to the other. You can take little steps in making it so. And so for example, the next time you have a presentation, you can sorry, not a presentation, the next time you are in a meeting and people tend to interrupt you, tell them, excuse me, I'd like to finish. If you find that people call you and interrupt you at work with the phone and they ask you and you have to stop what you're doing, try the next time when you speak to somebody that you know well and you're relatively comfortable with, try to tell them, excuse me, I can't talk right now. Can I call you back? Baby steps. Give yourself a mini challenge. What it is that you could do that you don't normally do that could make you more assertive, and try it once. You'll see, you'll feel a little knot in your stomach. You'll have discomfort. And you'll go through it and you'll do it. But once you do it, you'll go, oh, that wasn't that bad. And they didn't even take it badly. Oh yeah, no problem. Call me back, right? Next time somebody asks you things that you don't think you should be doing, just say no. Even if you're not comfortable saying no, it's okay to say no. So give yourself a mini challenge and start by little baby steps of seeing how you can change your behavior. And remember that confidence and to be assertive, confidence is not binary. Okay, it's not I am assertive or I'm not assertive. It's a skill that you can practice, that you can improve on, and that you can turn on and off. And as you practice and you do it more often, you will become the assertive person that you want to be to achieve the things that you want to do. And finally, a very practical exercise is to revisit past scenarios. So you would normally do this with an assertiveness coach, but you can do it with self-assessment. And you will be receiving a PDF with a handout of a lot of my content here today. And at the end of the handout in the worksheet, you will get this exercise, revisiting scenarios, and it will have these 4 sections. So you can think of a time in the past where you had a meeting where you didn't like the outcome, and you could describe the situation, so who was there, what they want, what was being discussed, and then describe how you responded. Then you describe how you felt after you responded the way you did, and then you revisit and you think, how could I have responded differently? And literally write it down. And you do this for 3 or 4 or 5. Once you have 6 or 7 scenarios, you're going to start to see that they repeat. And oh, that reminds me of that other time when I analyzed that thing. And you will at some point have the presence of mind to respond differently because you did these exercises. So that's what I have for you about assertiveness. I'm very grateful for your time. Jim.
Guy, so many things that we could talk about right now. I'm just going to refer to Bilal Lezaik, who says, would you mind giving the example again of how to address a passive person? I think that was part of your quadrant earlier on in the presentation.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's essentially what you don't do, you reward participation like we would do in this panel or in like a chat. So we thank you for your question. We value whatever input they say. So it's all about never, for example, if somebody participates, bringing them down or saying, well, making them feel like their response was silly. But so it's about psychological safety, because they have a threshold of psychological safety at which they don't respond where other people might feel comfortable at a lower level. But if you know somebody is not responding and you think, one-on-one, they always have good contributions, you can call them out on it in a soft way, especially if their nonverbal is showing that they have something to share but they're not sharing it, or they're annoyed by something but they're not saying it, right? So you say, I noticed that you didn't say anything in this meeting, or I noticed that you rolled your eyes, or I noticed that are you okay? Is something wrong? Did you hear something you didn't like? You let them know what you observed. You let them know how you interpret it. Are you in a rush? Is this something you don't like? You take a risk of interpreting it, but you say, am I right in understanding? And then you ask them if that is correct.
Brian Bovey comments on your third point. He says, could am I right also be is that right? Perhaps he's suggesting that's more neutral. What's your feeling?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Say that again.
So the item 3 in your steps is am I right?
Oh, yeah.
And Brian is questioning, could that be is that right? As a phrase.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I mean, so that's the other thing I find is that it's great to have different versions of the same thing. Otherwise, you kind of sound robotic, And so, say it in your own words. You don't have to say I noticed. You can say, hey, like it seems to me that, would I be wrong? You can say it however naturally it comes. That's very important that, it feels natural and not forced.
Also received a question about annoying people in the office. Sometimes even if we try and be professional, perhaps using phrases such as I feel that you are, it's quite hard to switch off the emotional part of ourselves, isn't it? Any advice on that?
No, it is hard, and there's also a lot of literature about the polite thing to do, and anger has no place in business. There's this kind of like idea, but in fact, if you're feeling something or some anger, it'd be interesting to listen to it, so that you can make sense of it, and then don't shy away from don't act on your anger, but you should definitely. It's a red flag if you're angry. Something's wrong. Normally it means you have a need that's not catered for. Okay, it's an unanswered need. So I think that the idea here earlier here, which is to practice detachment, relativize. Think of a friend who's had a more tragic event. Like we are in the moment of work and being in the moment of the stress of everyday things that happen, but we have to relativize, and we have to know that nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to be, a prick, a not nice person. They have their own dream. They're going through their own world of emotions and interests and pressures, and it's unfortunate that they're acting this way, but it doesn't, they are a human being like us. So we practice detachment, and if they express their anger with inappropriate aggression, that's their issue. And the idea of taking a time out, is also it's hard, but it's important to have it front of mind. So you think, okay, you know what, I'll just walk out.
And let's face it, it's got to be better allowing yourself to be a little bit angry at work rather than going home and just taking it all out on your partner, or if you're single,
Yeah.
your dog. Brian Bovey asks regarding your comments about assertive, confident body language. Are there any books or resources you recommend?
I really like Vanessa Edwards. I think it's Science of the People, especially because she does more than like what I do, which is public speaking. She does a lot about public speaking. But I think the thing about the body language, so if you're interested in it, check. I mean, there's many resources, but my general feeling is you can teach all these things, but in real life, it's not really what happens. I don't want to teach you to be a great actor, whether I'm preparing you for the stage or in a meeting. What I want is for you to be aware that people just focus, well, I didn't say anything. I didn't say, well, what? I didn't say that. And it's not what you say that really communicates, right? It's, what people receive is not just your words. And so once you're aware of that, then it's about giving the right other signals in the other languages, verbal and body. But then it's hard to just be an actor rather than pretend. You have to put your house in order and your self-scripting so that you're true you just say what you really believe because you've taken the time to think through exactly what it is that you need and put it in terms that are acceptable to voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, another way to put it is don't use that meeting to use as a sandbox to figure out what it is that you think and what you want to say. So if you have an issue with somebody and you get into the meeting and you talk, if that's the first time you're actually thinking through your problems, if it's an important enough issue and an important enough meeting and the power dynamic is such that you only have one opportunity to make your mark, because that's also true, right? I might be giving a lot of advice, but you might not have time during the day. So I'm aware that people do go to meetings and they just improvise, fine. But if it's important enough, then maybe take a pen and paper and start writing your thoughts. What's annoying me? What are the things? What do I really want? And you might brainstorm a lot of ideas, but essentially you're saying two things. And once you walk into that meeting and in your head, there are 3 problems and you have 2 requests to solve them. You walk into that meeting prepared and you'll be able to deliver with conviction and assertively.
In fact, Anna online recommends watch Lie to Me, the series, as a good training tool. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of lie detector specialists, and they take they have these YouTube videos where they tell about like baselines and like all the all the interviews on TV, and they kind of comment on it. So there's a lot of stuff around lie detection also. Yes.
Guy, another question in from Helen. She says, some people say there is sometimes no other choice but to react aggressively in front of an aggressive person in order to be listened. What do you think?
I don't know about being listened to because, but I mean, it is something very basic. So I'm not going to deny that it exists. But for sure, if it's about the safety of my kids, I probably would become a place where I'm aggressive. The problem is, I try to address this topic less in terms of a family scenario or personal life, but in terms of office life. The problem is that there is a box, there's a frame within which you can operate normally. And if somebody is being toxic or passive aggressive and they get you to go outside the bounds of acceptable behavior, you might get reprimanded because that's outside the rules. So it's about you not making that mistake. It's not really about them listening. I guess we'd have to work out through the example, but at the end of the day, it's about a work environment, and it's about getting your needs answered. And if it's not with that person, then you go to their boss, or you escalate it otherwise, or you find other strategies.
Don't you find, though, in some organizations, there's an official hierarchy and then there's an unofficial hierarchy, which is often a bit personality based. And, it's like in companies when it's the PA to the boss that actually ends up running the whole company just because she's kind of there.
Yeah.
How do we respond to these unofficial power structures, which can be rather annoying sometimes?
Well, I think, it's about what you see, and you see what you value. So first thing is to be aware of these parallel structures and these power dynamics, and not just be like scholastic technical. Some people who have people skills are good at reading that. Other people are very Cartesian. They like to do their work. They like to have a very clear framework. They're very analytical, and they don't like gray areas, and the people skills is often all about gray areas. So the first thing is about coming to be aware of these dynamics. And then also, if it's the PA and maybe she has, on paper, she shouldn't have the power, but the reality is that she does, you have to understand that she's also a human being, and she also has needs and desires, okay? So nobody wakes up in the morning, brushes their teeth, and decides, I'm gonna be disagreeable, I'm gonna be nasty today. They do it for other reasons. So that's why you have to start to think and ask the right questions, open questions, active listening. Is the brushing your teeth making you laugh, Jim?
No, I'm just thinking of all the PAs I've met in my life.
Yeah, I don't know. I've said the F word twice, so I didn't want to say the A word, but yeah. And so you say, I understand this. I feel that you basically want to draw them in. To be fair, I didn't put it in this webinar, but another aspect of this is nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. So what you see on the screen right now, this 4-step, it's like a twist on that. But if you're interested in Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. And then also active listening, asking open questions. If somebody is being aggressive, what you want to do is understand what makes them tick. And once you know what makes them tick, you can maybe give them, once you know not what makes them tick, what they want. Why are they being disagreeable? Maybe because everybody asked for like last minute and she's just so annoyed. So next time you'll ask 2 days before, you'll make an effort, you'll go. And if you are able to give them something that they want, then they will be appeased and maybe you can work with them. So that's all about influencing people, right? Understanding them.
Absolutely. Palmer, yes, no problem. We will send you the presentation via email. No problem. Salvatore says, FYI, next to Paul Ekman's books, there are also Joseph Messenger. So that's also a recommendation by Salvatore. We've also just put the link for the PDF. You can download it simply by clicking on that box on your screen right now. We're almost out of time, but Michael Sermon, thank you, Michael. He says, voice is important. Oh, this is a rather technical question, I think. What is the ideal rate of speech to get what you want? Should we slow down and use pauses if we want to make our point?
Yes, I actually skipped that slide, but yes, so pace is important. So a radio voice announcer, Jim, you'll know this is 150 words per minute. If you are, a dynamic presenter, maybe you go up to 180, like Tony Robbins. And so I would say also that what you do with your voice, you can be a bit more aggressive, especially if you have the skill set to just be able to have a sharp tongue. Speaking quickly and sharply can also be a non-verbal way of being aggressive because you don't even leave any room for interjection or space. So slowing down, and you can see it if anybody's upset, if a family member or whatever, you tend to take the opposite. You tend to be extra calm so that you kind of make them mimic you. So sure, volume is the same thing.
Wow. Guy, absolutely fantastic stuff. Makes a big change from investment funds data regulatory reporting, which was my last conversation, I have to say. So big thank you to everyone that's joined us today. Guy, we're just about out of time there. And of course, for people that want to get in touch with you, Guy, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn, Guy Benzeno. I'm on centerstage.lu is my website. So you just Google my name.
Okay, Guy, we are just about there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. It was good to be back at the club. I'd never done the digital version. I was happy to do a physical workshop a few months ago. And so looking forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Guy Benzeno. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. We're going to just flash on screen for you just for 10 seconds of your time. Future events coming up. We've got cybersecurity, 10 Shades of Risk. Do join us. That's a physical event. Oof. Whoa, goodness gracious me. Okay, 19th. I'm now the one speaking quickly. 19th of October. This is a breakfast in English. If you're interested about sustainable finance from Julian Frumuth, you can register now by clicking on the link on the screen. By the way, thank you to Brian Bovey, Michael Sermon, Bilal, Salvatore, and Helen as well. 21st of October, CSR. So that's just 2 weeks away. Come and join us. This is a French and English event in partnership with INDR and PwC. If you're interested in CSR, corporate social responsibility, what does that really look like in 2021? You can click on the register link that's on your screen. Salvatore says, good to see you back, by the way, Guy. That's for you. Meanwhile, 17th of November, it's my pleasure. I'm going to be hosting this. This is a real live physical event on the 17th of November as we talk about crypto assets. How can we regulate them? Of course, Bitcoin went back up to 50,000, didn't it? One Bitcoin's worth more than $50,000 again, despite the restrictions in China. So how can we regulate them? You can hear from 4 thought leaders about that on the 17th of November. Yes, so thanks again for everyone for joining us there. Oh, and that's the event I started with, 25th of November, cyber security. When we included on stage, we've got a legitimate hacker who I believe is going to be advising you. Did you know that when Tinder was launched, some hackers were using it to geolocate people in order to commit crime. More about that and other interesting twists on cybersecurity. That's a real live 10 by 6. So 10 speakers, 6 minutes each. And that will be held at the Athénée here in Luxembourgville. You can click on the register now for that event. That event is also in English and French. Okie dokie, I think we are done. Thanks very much to everyone who joined us on this call. Do join us again at future events. My name's Jim Kent, and indeed, we encourage you to reach out to Guy Benzano for more information on assertive communication. That's everything from us. Goodbye.